Science Basement!
Welcome everyone here today at the live edition of the Science Basement podcast here at the second HiLIFE Science Days. Today we're going to be discussing, as you can see on the screen, the journey from junior researcher to principal investigator. So first things first, let me introduce myself. My name is Rhiannon and I'm a third year PhD student in FIM at the University of Helsinki. And today I'm actually here on behalf of the Science Basement, where I'm a podcast host and also vice chair. There's quite a few familiar faces in the audience, which is nice to see, but for those who don't know, the Science Basement is a non-profit organisation which aims to give early career researchers the opportunity to learn and develop their science communication skills. Alongside the podcast, we have a few other platforms where we do this, including a blog, afternoon talk session, a youth science club, and many more. So that's the plug. And now let me introduce our guests. So today we have here with us three new PIs. Firstly, we have to my left Heli Mönttinen, who is a researcher in gene evolution. And then we have Veijo Salo, who is looking at cell membrane architecture, particularly in the cases of cardiovascular and liver disease. And finally, we have Nidal Karagic, who is looking at organism adaptivity. Both Heli and Nidal have recently started their labs as of 3 weeks or so ago. And their labs are based at the Institute of Biotechnology here at the University of Helsinki. And Veijo is starting his lab in early 2026, joint with Karolinska Institutet in Stockholm, and also at the Institute of Biotechnology here at the University of Helsinki. So before I fire the questions at them, I actually just want to ask the audience one question. Nobody panic, it's just to raise your hands, so don't worry. But it would be good to know who the profile of our audience is today. So if you are a bachelor's or master's student, can you raise your hand quickly? Okay, a couple of you, about 5 or 6. Then a PhD researcher. Okay, most people there. And then you can probably guess what's coming next. Any postdocs? Oh, thank you for coming. And I'm not sure there will be, but any PIs? Oh, nice. Great. That's really great. And any other research-related roles that we have here? Wonderful. Oh, thank you all for coming. I hope you all find something interesting out of today's discussion. So, firstly, let's all let the guests give them a bit more introduction about their career paths to date, and also some information on when within your career you thought that you wanted to become a PI. Heli, let's start with you.
Okay, so I obtained my PhD in 2015 from University of Helsinki, and after that I moved to UK to do a postdoc at Newcastle University. There I spent almost 3 years. After that, I moved back to Finland and I worked in industry for 1 year as a software developer. And after that, I returned to academia and University of Helsinki and Institute of Biotechnology to do my second postdoc. And after that, I managed to secure some funding to start my own group. And last week on Monday, I started my own group.
Great, thank you. And when in that journey did you realize that academia is for you, or becoming a PI was what you wanted to do?
Well, let's say so that I have always known that I like science and I like that I can be my own boss. And I like that there's always something where to aim. On the other hand, I have also always considered that there's kind of a random factor in academia. So you cannot be sure that even though you work hard, that you get funding and so on. But during my second postdoc, it went well. And I had some new ideas and there was suitable funding, and I thought to test if it works, and I think that was the point when it was clear that the next step where I'm aiming is PI.
Okay, thank you. And Veijo, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yes. Hey, my name is Veijo Salo. So I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at Heidelberg. But like Shannon mentioned, I will be starting my group next year. So for me, I initially was not so interested in science. I was very interested in music and playing in bands. I went to dentistry school because I thought that would be like a good living. But then first year of dentistry school, I went to the MD PhD program, and this was really interesting. And then I started doing research. Then I changed from dentistry to normal medicine or the basic medicine. I did medical doctor degree and research at the same time in University of Helsinki. And I think then I defended only 2020. No, yeah, 2020 from University of Helsinki. And after this, I went to do a postdoc at EMBL. And the reason why I wanted to go abroad was that kind of maybe focus more on research was that towards the end of my PhD, I was 1 year doing medical doctor work in the clinic. And then I thought that it was okay and nice, but every night I was still going to the lab to do research, even though at that point I really did not need to do it. So then I figured that maybe this is for me. And then I went to EMBL, and I think the idea of becoming a group leader, I think I never planned things like you have only a few years ahead of you to plan each time. So I think I'm still like, let's see how it goes, right? That's the idea, but you never know how things will go. So I think I'm still thinking about it somehow.
Great, thank you. And finally, Nidal, over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I did all of my studies in Germany at the University of Constance, did my bachelor's, master's, PhD there. And in that time, I kind of switched fields. So I started off in human toxicology, and then later became an evolutionary biologist. And I defended in 2022, did a postdoc here at the University of Helsinki for 3 years now. And yeah, as Heli last week started my own lab, which, I mean, lab in quotes, it's just me. And the decision to become a PI, or at least to try to become a PI, happened quite early during my PhD, because I realized what I wanted to study, so what the science is that I really wanted to do. But I knew that if I want to be completely independent and really focus on the work that interests me, then I have to somehow try to get my own lab. And so I think within the first year of my PhD, I decided, okay, this is what I'm at least going to try.
Great, thank you. You have many overlapping things in your backgrounds, but it's also, you've kind of gone on your own different career paths, which is quite nice to see the different evolution of your respective careers. One thing I wanted to ask about, actually, Heli, you mentioned that you transitioned from academia to industry for a short period and then back to academia. What were the main differences that you found during this period of going into industry?
Yes, well, in academia, I think that it's sometimes more like a lifestyle than a job. And also in academia, the life is sometimes a little bit like a roller coaster, that it goes up and then it goes really quickly down and so on. But in industry, it's more like a job. You sell your time for a company and you get paid for that. You work for the aim of the company. It's more structured. You have maybe less freedom, but on the other hand, it's maybe more separated, like from other life.
Okay, and Veijo, kind of a similar question towards you, because you mentioned that you were an MD and then transitioned to academia. I don't know if we have any MDs in the audience, but nevertheless, I think it's quite interesting to know what the comparisons were for you there and like the skills that you used in one versus the other.
Yeah, so I think for me, being MD, the clinical work is very nice and rewarding because you see patients and you see results quickly. But what I found maybe not suiting me so well is the fact that as a medical doctor, you don't want to be overly creative because you rather want to treat the patients the appropriate way. And this is the way we treat them, and that's the way you do it, and that's how, at least at the basic level, how you do medicine. Whereas in research, there is a lot of room for creativity. Sure, you have to be, do things appropriately, but you have to think outside the box and innovate and have new ideas. And I think this is what makes research a lot of fun. But one thing that is a negative side of research compared to other jobs is the fact that it's there is a lot more long-term stress that kind of accumulates and is a little bit kind of gets you down sometimes. Whereas in clinical doctor work, you have a lot short-term stress. So it's very stressful, but once you go home, you are home and it's not following your not ruining your nights or your weekends. Whereas research can do it.
Yeah, we probably all can attest to that. But yeah, it's very true also. yeah, I don't think I would want my doctor to be the most creative either. So yeah, it's quite an interesting comparison as well. Next, all three of you also mentioned that you moved abroad for some point during, either Nidal moved abroad now for his postdoc and now PI, but maybe Nidal, you can start with this and chip in if you have any additional comments. But what would you say is the importance of this, maybe for people in the audience who are thinking of doing a postdoc or even a PI, or what is do you think the importance is of going abroad at some point in your career?
So what I've heard from people while finishing kind of my PhD was that it's apparently super important when you apply for jobs afterwards or for grants. So I did my PhD in Germany, and there are a lot of grants for postdocs or junior PIs require you to have been abroad. So you can't even apply if you've never been. And the system in Germany is that you can also not become a PI at the university where you graduated your PhD. So they really need you to leave. And that was kind of the main career-wise kind of reason why I wanted to go abroad. But on the other hand, I just wanted to experience something new. Never been in Finland, never lived here, so I was like, why not? Let's just try it.
Yeah, I think that's normally the case of many people who end up in Finland, at least for me as well. It was like, let's see what it's like. Yeah, it's interesting that you say about the grants as well. I'll let you two also say your opinions, but I just wanted to add that I actually had never, because, yeah, as I mentioned, I'm doing my PhD, I had actually never thought about the benefits of moving abroad until I started even writing the funding applications for PhD salaries or whichever they were. And one of my supervisors said, oh yeah, it's important that you stress that you're not from Finland because it can actually be seen as a big advantage. So yeah, I guess this is also true. The further you get, maybe it's more important then. But yeah, Heli or Veijo, do you have anything to add about that?
I can add. So definitely you're correct in that way that it's important for getting funding to have like mobility and show a dynamic trajectory in your CV. But I think the reason for that is that actually it can really enrich your way of thinking and your academic profile. Like when you go abroad or to a new country, to a new lab, to a new institute, you will definitely learn new ways of thinking because things are done very differently in different places. And then of course, then after that experience, then you have at least an N of 2 that you've had done research in 2 environments, and this gives you it's N of 2 is a lot more than 1. So I think this is actually you should really consider it if you can. Of course, there can be reasons why you can't do it, but if you can, changing the environment during your career for at least a short period of time is definitely, I think, worthwhile.
Yeah, and if I can add, it's more related to that grants and so on, that it is very important, at least when you apply PI grants, that you can show that you have collaborators and networks also abroad, and it's much more easy to kind of have a network when you have actually been there and talk with these people every day.
Yeah, I think we will talk about more in depth about the grants now, but I think that's a good topic to bring up as well, because maybe as PhD researchers especially, or maybe even as postdocs, you don't always think about these factors in when you're looking for your next step. Maybe it's more to do with the science, and which is also equally as important, but what you enjoy, but maybe this is also a very important factor to consider, expanding your networks.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good point to consider. Like, let's say you're finishing your PhD and then you think about that maybe you want to become a group leader later on. It's of course important to go and follow your curiosity and go wherever you want to kind of pursue your ideas. But you can also a little bit think about it in a strategic way, that you likely want to have some change something in your work, either change the topic you are studying or then change the techniques you are applying, because and this will make it much easier later on when you're writing then grants or applying for positions. When you have a clear narrative of yourself, I did PhD this, and then I acquired this super expertise Y, and now I bring these together to do Z. So that just helps. And I think it's when I was, those days, this is not something that anybody told me. And it's a bit, so it's better to be told now, and then you know it, and then it might be a helpful thing to think about.
Yeah, actually, that you just touched on the next question I was going to ask. For both, I guess this doesn't necessarily apply to Nidal, but for both of you, Heli and Veijo, why did you choose to go to the labs you did for your postdocs? Was it anything in particular, or what? I mean, Veijo, you touched on then that you hadn't thought of this importance of maybe doing a new technique or adjacent technique or building the network in that way. But what was it that made you change the country or go to these labs specifically?
In those times, I was very interested in lateral gene transfers, and I was looking for a lab who is doing that. Then I ended up to a website of this research group at Newcastle University, and yeah, they were doing exactly that, what I was interested in.
Okay, so it was more for the science itself. You had like an interest based off your PhD and then went to kind of pursue that from what you knew of the field. Yeah, I think maybe I would say that most people I know, it ends up being this kind of way that they end up in a different lab.
Yeah, I think for me it was I had met my current supervisor, Julia Mohammed, in Helsinki. Actually, she gave a talk in a meeting, and I was blown away by her talk and her like intelligence. And then when I was then finishing PhD a few years later, she was the person I thought I would like to work in her group. And then for me, I also I stuck on a biological question, understanding how cells organize lipids, and I wanted to keep doing that, but change technique. And so I went to her group to a kind of with my idea for a project, but then applying like more cutting edge techniques that her group had developed. So in a way, that was how I made the decision. But of course, it's also, maybe you have family reasons also. So I have a partner. We had to, find a place where we both have opportunities. And this, of course, also then affects the final decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in academia, this is always the case if you have a partner or a family that you have to, move somewhere that it can accommodate both of you, of course. It's a good point to mention. On the topic there, you mentioned how your current supervisor was here in Helsinki. I wanted to ask, actually, this made me think of the buzzword, which is networking. Did you do this much during your PhDs, or was it not something you were doing actively? I know it's a skill that some people are very natural at and others have to learn or force themselves to do. So I wondered if you actually have any experience or advice regarding that. I don't know if anyone wants to go first. Nidal, maybe, if you have something you can think of.
Not much, honestly, but I'm personally somebody who's terrible at that. I'm not the person who would just go up to somebody and strike up a conversation, but I used to try, at least with people I knew their research, kind of try to force myself to go and at least talk to them and be like, okay, this is something that interests me, this is something I can see myself do in the future, or a certain method that I'm interested in. So I would at least try to pick certain people that I would try to talk to at conferences. But yeah, that actually did not help much, to be honest, with my network. It's mostly people that I've met through collaborators or supervisors. But I think in general, it is good advice to just find people that you really want to talk to and try to strike up a conversation with them.
Yeah, I also I'm not especially good with networking, but that's what I have noticed myself, which has been a very good tactic that I have participated parts of scientific societies. For example, I was a chair of Wiki Postdoctoral Association, and later I have been vice chair at the Finnish Society for Bioinformatics. And those has been very good places to network, because I have something concrete to do there, and on the side I have met lots of people from the field.
Maybe I can still add. So I'm a pretty social person. So for me, talking and meeting new people is not so difficult. But I think people can be different kind of temperaments. You can be shy or outgoing, but I think what's important to think about, let's say in conferences. Maybe you are a bit can I go to talk to this fancy PI or this person? But usually they will love it if you go talk to them. So that's the thing. If anybody comes to me, even talks about science or something I've done, for example, that's like super, like so nice, And that's the same thing, even with these like people who've done this for 60 years, run a lab. If you go to them and just whatever, say anything that like I really like some paper or your talk, they'll be happy to discuss with you. And people. In science, I think it's very important to actively build a network. So meet people and chat and be kind of because then you later on you never know who will be something that you then could reach out to and get like important information to pursue your next project or help you with something. So I think this is definitely and if you are not naturally can do it easily, like you guys say that maybe you are not so, then I think it's still good to put just extra effort, right? I think it helps, or what do you guys think? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's usually so that when after you have met the first few people and made it like first few contacts, then it's much easier to expand it later on.
Maybe one more tip for conferences, if you have many days of them, what I find is that typically there you get this feeling that even if it's a small conference and you see somebody, okay, that person maybe I want to go talk to, but then you think, okay, I'll talk to them later because I'll meet them in a later date. Usually that doesn't happen. So when you have your opportunity, you just have to go for it. And this I always kind of regret that, the final day comes so quickly and then you had all these people you would have wanted to discuss with. So, yeah.
Yeah, very nice advice there. Thank you. Yeah, particularly when you were saying, Veijo, about people are interested to talk about their research. I think this is what I was also going to add from my own experience. That people like to talk about what they do. And I think maybe in the audience, people can relate to it as well. Even if you have a friend who's like, oh, can you actually explain to me what you're doing? Then it's always very nice when they go into the detail and they put the effort in to understand. And I think it's the same thing for, everybody. So especially, these more intimidating situations where maybe someone is a leader in the field or something. I think it's always important to try and push yourself in this way, but yeah, not the easiest. But thank you for those tips. I think they are very useful. Okay, so now let's maybe talk a bit more about the funding aspects of going from a PhD to a postdoc and then also to the PI and the different levels of funding that are involved in this. This is a very timely topic as well, many of you might be applying for PhD or other forms of funding at the moment and hopefully not drowning in them. So I guess the first question here is really, maybe let's start with the transition from the PhD to the postdoc. I guess the first thing is, what is the window of applying from your PhD to your postdoc? At what point do you start applying for these grants? Maybe Heli, you can start with this if you have any input to this question.
Yes, well, after my PhD, I knew that I wanted to go abroad, and I had figured out already some time in advance, like that, what kind of opportunities there are. And if I remember correctly, in those funding sources, in those cases, it was maybe 5 years probably. But that kind of windows when you can apply grants, they can change very quickly. So it's always good to kind of check in advance and also like just before you're applying.
Yeah, I guess this is good to keep on top of and keep looking up when to apply for the grants. Because I think, yeah, as a PhD, you kind of do it as you go along. But then obviously for a postdoc, especially maybe the first one, it's, there's a window that you have to apply by. And I guess this is the same for the PI, which we'll get onto in a minute. But firstly, still discussing the postdoc grants, maybe Veijo, you can mention, what is the different kind of writing styles that you found for the postdoc versus the PI grants? For me, or if you know, or for Nidal, if you have more input. But for me, in the PhD grants, I find that they're much more about my individual project, which is already ongoing, or say for the personal grants, it's overview of my thesis. Is this similar for postdoc, or is it a bit slightly different style of writing?
Yeah, I think for postdoc grants, it's similar actually than PhD grants in my perspective, or I think so, but they have to be a little bit longer, and maybe you have to kind of it has to be more a mixture somehow, like that you also bring something to the table and the other group brings something to the table. So there has to be, again, like some kind of narrative in the way why it makes sense that, you know, you with your unique skill sets that you obtained in your PhD now work on this in the host lab. And then if those things come together, that will make like a successful grant application. I think I want to also add to this timeline thing that one thing that's good to keep in mind is that many of these that's like you can find a postdoc position, let's say abroad, and then go there. But then there's also quite strict time windows in how long you can be in a group before you then have to apply for a postdoc grant. Meaning that perhaps somebody will hire you and they can provide funding for you. But then if you want to also acquire individual like fellowships, then that's usually quite short window. So then that can be less than a year. So then you have to kind of really think about this, and dates are once a year only, so you have to be quite strict with the calendar in that way if you want to apply for these individual fellowships, which I would recommend doing because, you know, whichever lab you go for a postdoc, they will not mind if you have your own fellowship, and then it will look better for your CV. It will help you to kind of formulate your ideas. So that's good to keep in mind, yeah.
And a follow-up on that, for these fellowship grants, is it that you are writing as an extension of your research that you're already doing? Because if it's within the year, then you obviously won't have many results yet. So is it kind of like you still have to also generate the results for the grant, or is it more of a future?
I don't think that is necessary. At least what I did when I came here is I got a position and then started applying for these grants, and basically applied with the project that I was planning to do anyways for the next 3 years, and that is what I use for the postdoc grants. And of course, it's nice if you have some preliminary data, but I don't think it's necessary. What is really important though with these postdoc grants, or at least what I thought is that you also have to show that you're going to use this time for career development, for personal development. Besides the science only, you really have to show like, okay, I'm going to do these teaching courses, whatnot, leadership courses. I'm going to go expand my network at this conference or that one. So that is also something quite important for the postdoc grants.
Did anyone else want to add?
I want to second that. I think preliminary data for postdoc grants absolutely is not necessary. And they don't expect that. And that's also why it's like, especially if you're going to a new group and you can apply before you have even started. And this is commonly done. You can write it when you're still in your PhD lab, maybe wrapping up, and then how could you have preliminary data? So it's more about the ideas. So definitely, I would not worry about that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I can add that it's also a very important aspect that who is kind of the host group and how the research of host group supports your aims or your research or what you would like to learn.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's kind of implied, but just to clarify, for the original positions of these postdocs, were they advertised or did you contact the labs directly? How did it work in that way? Because I guess they already have funding, for, like as you mentioned, they employed you already and you started in the lab. But was this advertised openly or did you contact them individually?
So what I did like half a year maybe before I finished my PhD is just email people who I would like to work with. A lot of them got back to me, and in particular the position here, Claudius, who was my supervisor, I knew him from my PhD lab. He was a postdoc back then while I was doing my PhD, and then he came here. And yeah, that's how I got the position here. He was like, okay, hey, I got funding, would you like to come? I'm like, sure, why not?
Yeah, I think related to this, like, so for me, I contacted my current boss and then also a few other groups and did interviews. Now, unfortunately, this was right at the start of COVID times. So my planned tours of US and Europe were cancelled last minute. But this is also a networking opportunity that you should take, you know, a few labs that you're really interested in, apply to those and go there and you'll meet new people. Even if you don't end up joining the group, this will be a great connection to have. And then you asked about the funding specifically. So in my case, there was not any funding. So I applied for my own, and I've been mostly with own funding, but of course supported by also funds from my boss. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also just sent emails around, like to groups which I was interested in, and this group at Newcastle University they replied and they said that, well, but you need to apply your own funding. And then we wrote these grant applications together.
Okay, great. It's very useful actually to know that you reached out rather than seeing what was already available or if there's any open positions.
I can still add one thing about this is that even if the group has funding available, if you have the capacity and the time to apply for your own funding, it's definitely worth it. And in Finland, if you are going from Finland abroad, you will have a lot of opportunities that fund on this kind of career tracks, basically. And I think same from Germany, same from many countries. So if you go abroad, there's a lot of people who want to give you money, and which is good because then you can do science, with more resources. So.
Yeah, thank you. Now, talking about the next step. So we've just covered the transition from PhD to postdoc funding. I guess this is more recent for all of you three, but how does this then differ? Maybe first let's start with the writing style again, from the postdoc grant then to be writing the PI grants. Maybe Nidal, you can start.
Sure, yeah. So from the writing style, I would say they were relatively similar. It is very different from writing a paper. That was what kind of I noticed while writing it. It is nothing like a research paper. Very concise language. You have to be super strict with what you actually say and how you say it and how you frame it. So that was a big surprise when I started writing it. But yeah, compared to a postdoc grant, I think it was rather similar. Of course, longer, and the focus is not as much on you as a person or as a scientist. It is more on the larger vision of the project that you have or that you want to do. And that kind of becomes the main focus, at least with the Academy Fellowship. That was kind of what it shifted to, from it's about me and my particular development, more about the project itself and the vision of it.
Great, thank you. Was it the same for both of you, or was there any slight differences in how you found the writing of the PI grants?
I could add that at least in that application which I wrote, I had to also to describe how I will help my group members to develop their career. So as a postdoc, it was just about me, but now I had to also think that how I will help my group members to develop their career.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. It's more focusing on yourself as a manager of a group and how you're going to set that up, rather than a postdoc, which is still more individual than a PI.
Yeah, I think for me the most important in these kind of PI grants and the same is that you have to think about, you have to have some good idea what you will pursue. So, and this usually takes quite a lot of time to come up with. So it's iterative process, and maybe you apply many years and that gives you the and you don't get it and you apply again. But I think always writing it out a few times will shape it better. And I think maybe we're not discussing here that much, but there are also, of course, like if you're considering from postdoc to a group leader, one option is also applying for group leader positions. And this is something that you should do if you can, because the worst case is nothing happens, and then maybe they invite you over and then you can give a talk and interview, and this is also really nice. You meet fantastic young scientists, and you can, and those kind of applications which you write for these group leader positions, they are like the PI grants. They're just a shorter version of it. So for me personally, it was easier after I had already written such documents to kind of then like, okay, now I'll have to make this fluffy sounding piece a bit more grounded in reality. And then that's how you can kind of build on it. Another thing that helped me a lot is that in EMBL, where I'm a postdoc, we have actually a course where we kind of go over this kind of applying for academic jobs, and there we have to one time write these materials, and then somebody gives feedback. So I think feedback from people is very important, and I think the feedback doesn't necessarily, you don't have to wait the last minute to have your final thing. You can also just get feedback on your one-page idea thing, and this can also be really, really useful. Yeah.
You mentioned there about these group leader positions. I haven't actually heard of these before, so can you just explain, are these kind of already advertised by the university itself, or like as the role, or is it related to a grant?
Yes, I can talk about this. So, many institutes worldwide have open calls for PIs. And this is in the US, that's the typical way how people become group leaders, is that they go to this call, apply, and then, and also in Finland, there are similar things, like the BI has group leader calls, there is the HiLIFE tenure track call, maybe, and then in Europe, there is let's say, many research institutes have open calls time to time, and they will describe like they're looking for this kind of person with this kind of merits, but usually it's very broad. So if they will say like a motivated researcher interested in biology, and then you can think about it and apply. I don't know if the other panel members, you guys applied to these kind of things, or
Not. I mean, I did just apply for the BI group leader position. That's the only one. Other than that, I hadn't. But I've seen a lot of these calls where it's really like, oh, somebody who works in biology, which is like very broad. But if you make it kind of a nice sounding project, I think this can still work.
And are these positions themselves funded, or do you have to have the funding already?
So usually they are depends on this. Everything is
course.
different, but usually they come with some funding,
Okay.
and they're not. And usually it's not then dependent on. Like the idea is that you also acquire your own funding, but why I actually like this model is that in a way it kind of, like some institute can then decide that, hey, this person seems very exciting. We're going to believe in him or her and provide with resources. So in Max Planck institutes, for example, in Germany, it's 9 years very generous funding. So if you get that kind of position, you can do a lot of great science without actually worrying so much about grants. So I'm surprised. This is something that maybe when you are later on in your career, you might be different fields.
Yeah.
But this is definitely something that for me, I applied to a few, and I was visiting a few places, and this was very enriching experience.
Yeah, that's very nice advice and description. For maybe Nidal, you can answer this one first. For the grants you end up receiving, how did you go about applying for this? Were you applying at the end of your postdoc or during it, or like did you apply straight away as soon as you could, or how did you go about applying for the PI grant that you end up getting?
So I haven't finished my postdoc yet. I would have another 2 years. So I applied basically in the middle kind of, but I was always supported by my supervisor quite a lot. He has been pushing me from the first year on, like, hey, you should try and see if, you never know, it might work out. And so, yeah, it was kind of in the middle that I was like, okay, there's the Academy Fellowship, let's try it. The project that I applied with was something that I had, for years really wanted to do. So that was kind of the easier part to come up with a project, but then the writing was kind of the difficult part in applying, because, as I said earlier, it's a completely new kind of way of writing and applying. But you never know. So you should always try at any point.
That's very good advice. No harm in trying, I guess, and you always learn something from it. Heli, was it the same for you with your recent grant?
Yeah, well, I must say that because I already defended my thesis in 2015, so I was already out of many of these PI grants, starting grants. So, but luckily I was told that Foundation have funded researchers to start a group, and maybe it's worth to try. And then I decided, because there was no good point after the second postdoc, and I had ideas and time to write, so I tested that. But if I can give an advice to other younger researchers, I advise to apply immediately when you can, when you're eligible. Don't wait for papers, more papers to support your application, because you cannot never know. And also, when you're writing this application, you will learn the style, how to write the application, and next time it will be better and more likely to be funded.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the Q&A for the last 10 minutes, I wanted now to move on from talking about the funding to actually talking about setting up your lab. So I guess more of the real life, I guess, maybe exciting, hopefully exciting part. Before the positives, maybe let's talk about the challenges of what you think or I don't know if you've already experienced in your first week, but maybe not yet, but or what you've been thinking of, the challenges you think you might face as a new PI. Maybe Heli?
Well, that's what I have learned so far during my scientific career is that something will always fail. So when the first time comes that something what I have planned doesn't work at all, well, that is kind of the first challenge, like that, how I deal with this one.
Yeah, that's a very probably relatable point for most people in the audience. Veijo, how about you? What challenges are you thinking that you might face?
I think I would be very busy next year and the coming years, so I can imagine time management between family and different research and other roles will be a big challenge. That being said, like more philosophically, what I worry about a little bit maybe for the research is that whether I will have the patience, because like when you're like a postdoc or PhD, you're driving your own project, and all the time you can work as much as you like, basically. But as a PI, you have to kind of give your students their own time to develop things, and you have to like try to understand that to build a group will take several years, and you have to establish things like step by step and not go for just like, I don't know, quick wins or quick results, but rather build like a foundation. So I think I have to actively think about how I can kind of manage that kind of like expectations. Yeah.
Nidal, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest worry at the moment is hiring somebody. I've never hired anyone. And with the Academy Fellowship, you get one person to hire, which means a lot really depends on that one person. And it might be that, I don't know, personalities don't match, which wouldn't be great for the science either. And then you have 4 years, and if it's not a really good match or a perfect match with that person, these 4 years might be over sooner than you think. And then, yeah, it might be difficult to move on from there. So that is something that I think worries me too much. I don't think it's really that bad, but at the moment, yeah, I'm thinking like this is going to be awful, but let's see.
And if I can add one another thing, like now I have one grant for 3 years, but where the second grant comes from, that's kind of next.
Yeah, I guess you're always thinking about the next funding source as a PI, because then it's not only you that's relying on it. I guess as your lab grows, it's also more people. And yeah, also for the hiring, it's true that we don't have much experience with this in our careers. We've never really been involved in hiring someone, so it's a very good point that this, I can imagine, be quite stressful when there's a lot of pressure on the position. Okay, then maybe the more exciting things, what are you looking forward to most with setting up your lab? Maybe Nidal, you can go first.
Sure, yeah. So I'm most excited about the actual project. I mentioned earlier that this is something I've been wanting to do for years now, and now I actually get to do it. So this is definitely what I'm most excited about, finally kind of realize my own ideas and put the work into creating my own research venue that I will hopefully pursue for a long time.
Thank you. Heli, do you want to go?
Yeah, well, one thing what I really look forward is that I have now work on my own, mostly like on my project like last years, and now I have opportunity to hire, or I have hired 2 smart people to join my group, and now I have these people with whom to talk about this project and share ideas. And also I like that aspect that I can now mentor younger researchers and help them to succeed in their scientific career, and that I find a very rewarding aspect.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think for me it's similar things. I think the most exciting thing is, of course, making new discoveries. Like seeing things for the first time is super like exciting. And that being said, I'm also looking forward to kind of yes, having students and then discussing things, because I have a lot of ideas always, and then I can execute more of them than I can currently execute, which is great, which is also very exciting, but also a bit scary, is that now I don't really have to ask from anybody's permission in the future, right? I mean, ethically, yes, of course, but like I can do, if I want to do something crazy, like something, we can at least try to do it, but which is a new thing, and I'm looking forward to that also. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's very nice that all of you have similar ones, but also a bit different what you're looking forward to in becoming PIs and developing in that stage of your career. So finally, last thing before we do the Q&A, maybe you could all, in a very short snippet, you've been giving it throughout, but if you could just summarize what your main advice would be for anyone who's looking to continue their career in academia, just to really hit home that point that you think might be the best advice. If anyone can go first, or maybe you need some time to think. Maybe Nidal?
Sure, yeah. Think of your ideas early and just apply as soon as you can for grants and funding. Nothing is stopping you, so why not try?
Perfect. Veijo, do you have any?
Biggest advice, I think, this is a pretty tough job, I think, so you have to have this kind of self-motivation and drive. Otherwise, I think it's not worth to pursue it, because it can also have like negative sides to life. So that being said, if you have this drive and this curiosity, then always follow it. Pursue your ideas and believe in yourself, because nobody might do it for you somehow, and then I think then you will probably succeed. Yeah.
Thank you, and Heli?
I think that maybe the most important thing in science is actually resilience, that after the failure, you stand up and try again or try something different. But that's the most important part, that after failure, you keep on trying.
Yeah, thank you. It's all very nice pieces of advice there that hopefully everyone can take in their stride. Okay, so thank you all for listening to our live podcast today. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Can someone pass out the microphone? Thank you. Maybe Mohammed over here.
So thank you for your advice. And my question is, for those who applied for the ARF, the Academic Research Fellowship, how much preliminary data did you add, and how important was that for for the success of your grants?
I had 0 preliminary data, so yeah, it can work without any.
What was the question about the Research Council of Finland application? Yeah, I think there I had some preliminary data, but this can be your postdoc not yet published data, right? It doesn't have to be something that's made specifically for that project. I think the preliminary data can also be published, like your work that is published. It just shows that I think in those applications, it's good to show that you have some kind of feasibility in some of the approaches, and that should be work that is done by you. But I don't think whether it's published or not published, or I don't think that will make a difference. That's my feeling. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Yes, thank you very much for the amazing discussion. So my question is related to grants application for postdocs, but also for PIs. So you need to have your own ideas. You need to come up with your own ideas. But we know that no matter how those ideas are excellent, you need to make them fundable. So what a compromise you had to make in order to get the funding, or how much could you stay loyal to your original ideas without changing a lot before you get the fund?
At least I think you have to stay loyal to your own ideas. So write what you think it will be the best science, and that will has best chances of being funded. One thing I want to point out, that of course for postdoc grants, it can also be an idea that you co-shape together with your postdoc supervisor. So it doesn't have to be all coming from you and people, like let's say you came to my group, I would have a lot of ideas, we can write a grant together. But then you shape it, but that's.
And I think that it's important that your idea is possible to be tested somehow, and you can convince the reviewer that it can be tested, your idea, and kind of to build that methodology around it.
And I also agree you should stay loyal to your idea, but at least for the postdoc grants, what I did have to do is reduce them so that they fit in kind of the timeline that a postdoc grant would give you. So you always have to keep in mind, is this feasible in this given time, which I think is a quite important detail to have in your grant applications.
I'd like to say that the feasibility doesn't necessarily, like, it's a bit, like, let's say for a 2-year grant, you write something that is feasible in 2 years, although we all know it probably will take a bit longer. I don't know if you had this feeling, but at least that's my feeling. Like I wrote, 6 months I do this, but of course it took 1 year. And,
Yeah.
Okay, next question. I was wondering, what do you think about this vision that some people say is that nowadays science is not taking more risks? There is no real innovative ideas because somehow the publication wall and the people which actually fund science prefer to take like projects that are more guaranteeing that the science will be deliverable in the short term rather than highly ambitious, highly disruptive projects.
For me, I feel that's not the case, but maybe I've been somehow lucky or worked in realms where I don't think that has been a factor. So I rather think that making your science quite bold and potentially transformative, like if it succeeds, is a good way to obtain funding. And playing it too safe and making it too like narrow scoped will be less chance of getting funding. And I think this is the case for both, like in my experience, for both like Finnish foundations and also for international things. So I think you have to be bold.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with this. I don't know how it is in like medical fields, which probably most people in HiLIFE kind of are under. But at least in my field, evolutionary biology, you do need to be somehow progressive, use some new methods that have never been used, find a new system, ask questions that we couldn't address before. So I think it's still quite important to do that.
Great. Is there any? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, you all touched upon some of the challenges being things like hiring or working with a team or time management. How many of these kind of soft skills or leadership skills do you think you learned kind of along the way, along your career path, versus did you have to go out of your way to train to learn some of these skills?
I think with hiring, I don't know what you guys think, but I've never hired anyone. I think as a postdoc, you really don't do that. Maybe students, like master students, bachelor students, you might. And I would say I didn't necessarily go out of my way, but I did supervise a lot of students with their thesis. And I hope that this has given me at least some skills to kind of how to manage a student or a PhD student, postdoc or whatever, and to kind of get a sense in the beginning, okay, would this be a good fit or not? How this will play out, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think the best way is to learn by experience. So if you can get students, it's great. And that's maybe one thing where also having your own fellowship funding could help, because perhaps then that could be partially paying for the salary or the money comes from someplace else. That way you get a lot of, having your own student in a way is great experience for learning how to do it. I also think nowadays there's more and more these formal training opportunities, like in soft skills. At least at EMBL, we have quite a few like courses, and I think taking those. I took one on hiring this summer, but I don't know how useful it will be. But these are available, and then you get maybe some tools to think about it in a structured way, and you get like discussions like we're having now, which might be quite useful. I think in Helsinki there's also such things are available, so you should definitely go for them when you feel they are appropriate for your needs. Yeah.
I have also felt that, for example, university pedagogy courses are useful, like because they cover, for example, supervising and these kind of things and learning styles and so on. And the other one, I have found it very useful that I have experience on being a chair in a scientific society, and that kind of gave kind of a nice experience, like how it is to manage a bigger project and kind of that you have a team around you.
Thank you. One final question before we finish up.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a super interesting discussion. I was wondering actually a little bit about life-work balance. You said you're a bit worried about the busy years ahead and I think, Heli, you said really nicely that academia is more like a lifestyle. So I was wondering, were there any particularly challenging times to do this life-work balance, and how did you overcome those times?
I think during my PhD it was really difficult. I was in a lab where working 24/7, 7 days a week was normal. So when I shifted to being a postdoc, I consciously made this decision that this will not be the case anymore, that I will work until maybe 5, 6, and that's that. So I think you really have to put in the effort to, for yourself, decide this is how much I'm going to work, and of course try to be efficient in that time, otherwise it doesn't work. But that was at least my experience. Like, I really had to think about, okay, this is how much I want to, not necessarily can, but want to work every day.
Yeah, and I think that it's good to put some kind of limits for your day, because in long run, if you work very long days in row, very long time, at least I noticed that I become inefficient, so I cannot do anymore that many things in given time. So during my postdoc time, which was maybe one of the period when I work longest hours, I tried to do so that at least one day a week I did something completely different.
I have to say, for me, the easy way to do this is by having a child in a foreign country when your partner is also a researcher and you're both working. That will definitely put some limits on your work life, on your working hours. So this works. Yeah.
Maybe pets also work.
Maybe cats also work. Yeah.
Great. I think that's all we have time for, but thank you very much for all your questions, and thank you very much also to our guests today on this episode of the Science Basement podcast. And yeah, thank you again. I hope it was all very interesting.